Kiss my ass, you ugly old bitch!
Well, this movie sure as hell can. What is going on, guys? Here we are now on the beginning of the rough Jeepers Creepers entries, starting with, of course, Jeepers Creepers 3, done by the one who gave us the first two, Victor Salva, and let me tell you, this has not been a fun revisit for me. I have always hated this sequel, even though it's kind of a in-between sort of sequel, which I'll get into on more of like the mix in a bit. So, for example, this is a movie that obviously was not met with a lot of good approval at all. You know, this one definitely was received poorly and for a lot of good reason, which I'll be getting into. So, let's get into this movie I absolutely hate. Starting off on the positives. For what I can definitely say is that while we do get Victor Salva back as our director here, while we do get Jonathan Breck back here as the Creeper, he is in a terrible movie, unfortunately to say, but he is doing his best here as the Creeper. Jonathan Breck, you know, he may not be entirely as great as he was in the previous two films, but he's doing his best with what he has to work with as the Creeper. Like, he's still got that intimidation factor, that way of trying to sort of scare you and just, you know, give you a bit of those chills and stuff, the way he responds to certain things, you know. Jonathan Breck still brings that characterization to the Creeper throughout this film, even though he's obviously in a terrible film and obviously he's just working with a terrible set of ideas throughout this film. What happened, like, from before the events of the bus? This is a movie that obviously is supposed to be set between the events of the first and second film, and it's an interesting direction, but it's also something that, while I kind of do respect that idea, it's something that kind of I'm a little bit mixed on. Like, maybe it works, but maybe it doesn't entirely. And to follow with that, you get some pretty good, you get a good intro to start off with these crows, like, you know, that are tied to the Creeper. You get this nice opening with crows that are just, you know, on this tree to start off with, and it starts off small, and then there's just like this whole array of crows just swooping by, making all those sounds, and that's pretty iconic for a terrible movie like this. You get the sheriff from the first movie, Davis, done by Brandon Smith from the first film, who is like in a main character role with this other sheriff who used to be like sheriff before, called Danny Tashtego. So these two sheriffs here, you know, Davis and Danny, they like sort of band together to form a bit of like, you know, a hunting team to like go after the Creeper after what happened in the last film, where like the Creeper abducted Dari Jenner. So now obviously we get to see a few things like how the community is obviously coming together. There's a hunting team that are trying to go out and take revenge on the Creeper, and that kind of leads to some pretty interesting ideas where we get a bit of like exploring part of its origin, even though not all of it is done as well as you may think when you hear that kind of storyline for this movie. And carrying on, you know, you even get like Meg Foster here, who was like in stuff before, like They Live, for example, John Carpenter's They Live. She's good here as Galen Brandon, because obviously what we do get here to expand on is in the first film there was those two people who went missing, Kenny and Darla, and this film obviously gives us a bit more intel on Kenny back in 1978, 23 years ago, the night he and Darla obviously went missing, were killed by the Creeper. We get to see more on his grandmom, Galen Brandon, and even his daughter, Addison Brandon, who is obviously our other main character in here, done by Gabriel Hoare. And you also get Chester Rushing, who I'm sure his name was Tommy, who he did in Stranger Things before this. And yeah, he's in this movie as well as one of the main characters alongside like Stan Shaw, Brandon Smith, Meg Foster and Gabriel Hoare and Jonathan Breck. You know, they're pretty much the main characters that we're focused on seeing throughout this film mostly as it goes. Again, this is a movie where some of the cars, the locations, like the first two, isn't that bad. Like I like seeing that we get more on the farmlands, the meadows, the highway roads. We get some animals in here, like a few horses and like maybe like a few horses and stuff, for example, we get in this sequel. I like seeing that we get a bit more on the Creeper's weaponry here. We get a bit more on the Creeper's weaponry with like a pike that he uses to target people with. You know, the use of that pike that he has in this third film is pretty fun to see. Like there was a pretty awesome kill that he had in here with that pike of his, the Creeper. He like, there's these like friends, these teenage friends of one of these other characters called Kirk, and like two of his friends are just like running off after they like sort of encounter the Creeper out of by accident, and then when they're running, the Creeper just literally aims and tosses his pike and just gets them all in a double kill, just literally impales the two of them on this tree. And that is another iconic scene to come out of a film like this. So that's something that I can definitely say is a highlight of this franchise for me. There's a part where our main character Addison, done by Gabriel Hoare, she gets caught by the Creeper, ends up in its truck at one point, and unlike the first film, we get to see a bit more from that, where she's actually spending time inside the back of the Creeper's truck, you know, wrapped in a sheet and seeing all the weaponry. So it's nice to see obviously a bit more of what's inside the Creeper's truck, even though there are some big problems I have with that truck throughout this film, which I'll get onto in a minute. And just even like the soundtrack isn't done by the composer who gave us the soundtrack for the first two films. Bennett Salve didn't reprise his role as the composer for the third entry. So we have a new composer here, Andrew Morgan Smith he's called, and he did a pretty good soundtrack for this. Like, it feels very relatable to the first two film soundtracks. You know, it's got that kind of Jeepers Creepers feel, the way that they do a bit of those like beats and that, like, you know, very calming rhythm. You know, the soundtrack was always pretty good for Jeepers Creepers 3, even though again there's some of these good things here for a terrible movie like this. Last of all, I really do like that in the credits we do get like a bit of artwork. In the end credits of the film we get some artwork on like the events of the first three films to do with the Creeper, and obviously some of the victims he killed, some of the weaponry he used in those three films, specifically the past two. that is pretty much the best I can bring up for all the positives. And yeah, I've really just not got that much to say when it comes to a film like this of what's actually makes it good, because even if I have positives for it, it's not a good film by any means, people. It's terrible. For a fan like me, you know, we really did wait 14 years to be disappointed by this bullshit. So going on from there with the mixed. This is obviously, as I've said, this is set between the events of the first and second film. I'm not really a fan of, you know, seeing that that's obviously what we waited 14 years for. So we could have really just gone without the whole, you know, what's set before the events of the second film and set after the events of the first. We could have just gone straight from Jeepers 2 to having our Jeepers Creepers 3 film that we actually wanted. If they really wanted a prequel movie, you should have just focused it on Kenny and Darla from 23 years before the events of the first and second film. That's what you should have done if you really wanted to do timeline nonsense like this with your third film. Addison and Buddy, done by Chester Rushing and Gabriel Hoare. They could have been, you know, better characters than they actually turned out to be. You know, there was stuff going on between them that was like, they're decent, they're a little bit like just saying this and that, and they obviously have a bit of feelings for each other. They're those kind of teenage characters throughout this film, but there's not really much between them, and I think they could have been much better than what they had to work with, you know. I mean, obviously Chester Rushing was much better as Tommy in Stranger Things before this, but yeah, Chester and Gabriel doing the characters that they did here, not very good. You could just as much as pretty much in the characters in Jeepers 2 care less to remember them. So yeah, they deserved better on that hand. And the setup for the bus at the end of this film that sets up the second film, I get it, I respect what they're trying to do there, that apparently at the end Buddy says like he's going somewhere, he's going to this place called Bolander, something to do with like his family's business or whatever, ranch business I think it is, and he's just saying that he might stay there for an extra day, and apparently that's just the reason why we didn't see him in the second film after the events of Jeepers Creepers 3. Like, it's just like, I get what they're doing, and they're setting up obviously the second film with that ending. That Buddy was one of the students apparently that, you know, is a part of Bannon High School. He was on that bus, but apparently went somewhere else. I don't know. They just kind of set up something that just really meant nothing and didn't go anywhere anyway, because Buddy was nowhere to be seen in the second film, and no one even mentioned like his name, so obviously that was kind of just a waste of time. But I get what they're doing. I get that they're setting something up for the second film, Jeepers 2, with the school bus and the creeper going after those kids on the school bus, but it doesn't go anywhere, and it's kind of just a wasted attempt really. With Galen Brandon, done by Meg Foster, she has a point in the film where she's like going through these visions, and while she's a good enough performer, her whole vision situation is just like, we've already had this with Giselle and Minxie in the first two films done by Nikki Acox and Patricia Belcher, but we don't need this. We don't need this for another person. And as interesting as it might be to see that obviously she has a way of talking to her dead son, Kenny Brandon, it's just, you know, we get it with the visions already from people like Giselle already, so we don't need another person as well as Minxie having these visions again. It's pointless, and we get it already, and I know that they're trying to expand on things, but we don't need it for another person. All we need to really do is just concentrate on one person with these premonitions and just go further from there. We get that cameo at the end of the sister, Trish Jenner, who is obviously the one that's been narrating the film apparently, and we just see how she's obviously gone on to be like, I think, a journalist, and she's obviously intends to seek revenge and obviously get justice for her brother when the creeper returns from, you know, when he wakes up soon, 23 years from the year that obviously Jeepers Creepers 1, 2 and 3 are set in. Again, kind of just, she didn't need to be here. She didn't need to have to put up with a role that small, that kind of pointless. So yeah, you know, it's nice seeing her, but we didn't really need her in this terrible movie. I would have much preferred, honestly, that they thrown her in Jeepers Creepers 2's ending with the older Jack Taggart, obviously, in that barn holding the creeper. That would have been a better way to bring back Trish, rather than in this terrible film. On to the negatives, and there are plenty of relevant negatives to bring up about this terrible film, people. There is a way of exploring the creeper's origin, and that specific way of how they explore the creeper's origin throughout this film is pretty, like, annoyingly terrible. They have this, like, severed hand that Kenny Brandon, the night before he died, the night before in 1978 when he and Darla went missing and got killed by the creeper, apparently Kenny Brandon came across this severed hand of the creepers, and that's obviously their way of just, like, finding out its origin. The creeper's severed hand, clearly moving because of, like, animatronics on its own. They just, like, touch it and obviously are able to see into the creeper's past, see what it was, see how it came to be, and see maybe what its name was or what they can actually call it. You know, all of that kind of stuff comes from this fucking hand that has to be probably the lamest way to explore the creeper's origin. You know, it just takes a hand. I mean, if you had to ask Victor Salva himself why choose a hand, he'd probably say talk to the hand, and probably that severed hand to be specific. And overall, while I may enjoy Danny and Davis done by Stan Shaw and Brandon Smith, their dynamic may be good, but when it comes to other characters here, such as Addison and Buddy, the performances are weak, the performances feel dry, and like no one really wants to be there, because clearly they must all know that they're doing a terrible low-budget film anyway. And the cast is just so overly filled, like, unlike the first two films where it was just like a few locals and our main characters to root for and all that. Like, for example, Daria and Trisha in the first film, Giselle, the Taggarts, like, done by Ray Wise and Sean Fleming. You know, we had all those characters to root for in those first two films, and the cast was simple. In Jeepers Creepers 3, there's just tons of people that we do not even know their names, or even, like, what kind of, where they even come from. We just see a bunch of random people thrown in for, like, no reason at all. There's just all these random people just coming out in certain scenes, and they're just like, what are they even doing there? They're just there and they're not even doing anything, because they're just there for literally a few minutes, but we don't learn anything about them. You know, that's not how you do characters in a movie like this. Even the truck, you know, while it's great to see the Creeper's truck again since that first film, the Creeper's truck is all over the place. To start off with, the Creeper's truck is parked out of this sheriff station as we got from the first film, and there's no reason for the Creeper to leave his truck parked behind for those people to investigate what's inside it. And worst of all, the Creeper's truck is now a fucking Batmobile. It has all this weaponry to it, and not just the kind that contains like a throwing star. I'm talking like it drops out all these chains and stuff to just latch onto people and hold them captive. Or even like these fucking knockback shell bombs, these fucking bombs that look like knockback shells, from Mario Kart, that just blow up things with terrible CG effects. It's awful. And even just like all these, like the way the gates just operate, and the Creeper has like this telekinesis all of a sudden, it makes no fucking sense. The Creeper's truck, the Creeper himself with the things he can do, some of the stuff in here just makes no fucking sense, because we never had that from him in the first two films. It's fucking infuriating. And even a scene where like one of these people to do with this hunting team, apparently, they just like have this sort of like truck that they're driving in around at one point, and there's this like sign that they have on it that says "Bee killing you," which of course is to do with, you guessed it, the bee eating you sign. And this is supposed to be set in the year 2001, the same year as the events of the first two films, and you get that "bee killing you" sign. That's just a complete disgrace, a complete joke to just rip off the bee eating you sign. That's lazy. Why the fuck would you put that in a movie like this that's supposed to be a serious film when clearly it's not, when you're throwing out shit like that? The climax is underwhelming. The climax when he has apparently Addison held captive in his truck is underwhelming. He's just like, obviously, like you got bad CG and just not really anything exciting, nothing to really keep you thrilled or you feel like there's anything unpredictable. And even the part where apparently they finally say that they found out what the Creeper is, we do not learn shit about what they know about the Creeper's origin. All they pretty much stress is that it's ancient, just like Minxie at one point said in the second film. They said at one point that the Creeper's ancient, that's all we get. We don't get to see any premonitions, because I guess the movie's too low budget for that shit. So all we get is just them saying that they have, by sign, we know what you are, and that's it. The Creeper just breaks down, and we don't know anything about the Creeper's origin whatsoever. So what a waste of time that was for us to expect we were going to see something amazing about the Creeper's past. Nope, not in this film, sadly to say. Kirk's friends, when they're like come across this truck at one point, they just like say like that they saw all this sort of stuff to do with the Creeper, apparently. Like they know that the Creeper sings this Jeepers Creepers song, he goes around and eats people. Just literally a day or two after the events of the first film, they already know about this, and they know about all this stuff about the Creeper, and it makes no sense for them to know about that. It's fucking stupid. Again, bad writing, and just has nothing to do with what the community should know about the Creeper, because the Creeper's too mysterious for them to know about this.
What story? The guy who drove around and ate people.
In a scary-ass old truck with that license plate.
Jeepers Creepers. What? Wasn't that the song the guy sang or something?
That would have worked, something like that would have worked a lot better if it was actually during the events of like 23 years after the events of the first two films, where we get the Creeper obviously in the Taggart barn. That would have made more sense for people like Kirk's friends to say what they know about the Creeper and that he went around and ate people in his truck. So that stuff is just, you know, where the bad writing is and where you are sure as hell going to be pissed with what this movie throws at you. I just kind of hate how the movie feels too modern. The movie feels too modern with its cast and its atmosphere of what it's trying to explore. You know, it tries to do things with a bit of a style to it. When you get like the locations, the cars, they're trying to stay true to some of the source material, but it's pretty lazy because of just all of the stupid things like I've just brought up, and that just kind of makes the film feel too dry, too modern, and it's pretty flat and boring as well, that when you get all this sort of stuff like too many characters and you don't know who to concentrate on. It's the kind of stuff that just really makes the movie just so dry, so flat, and like you don't remember anything that iconic about it. And for that, it really is obviously the weakest of the three for the Jonathan Breck Jeepers Creepers films. Overall, with the bad CGI, like there are scenes where the green screen, the CGI couldn't be more obvious. There's some bad green screen scenes, terrible in fact, and you even get like some terrible climax where like Danny and Davis are taking on the Creeper. The Creeper just swoops on down at Danny at one point and just, there's a slow-mo shot and it's just fucking stupid yet hilarious of just how the Creeper's just carrying his battle axe and aiming for Danny, and we just literally, I swear, I kid you not, we get a 12-second shot of the Creeper just coming down and striking towards Danny with his battle axe, and he's just like shooting at him, and it's hilarious. It's stupid just how they execute that scene. You know, this movie was just always so dry, so pointless, and it just really was not worth the wait. You know, we all waited 14 years for an absolute shit show of a movie. One that looks like it was made for YouTube, for a fan film really, to be honest. And this is the stage where apparently the issues towards its director Vic DeSalvo, the controversy towards him came up. I'm not going to go into any of that. but this is obviously where the controversy towards Victor Salva came up, and that's kind of why there was these problems. And they didn't even like have United Artists as their distributor anymore, and they went on to apparently Screen Media. Screen Media was their distributor for this film. And of course, I even do hate the Creepers look in this. The Creepers look is pretty fucking dreadful. Like, compared to the first two films, you could obviously tell that Jonathan Breck had that energy back then in those first two films from early 2000s specifically. Here, he's nothing like those first two films. It's obvious that they didn't put that much effort into him looking the way that he should. You know, there's not even like the teeth on his cheeks anymore in this film. And you can just tell that he's obviously gained that beer belly at this point in his, you know, at his age. So it's really not good. And obviously he should have really tried to exercise to lose all of that if he was going to do a film like, you know, that's set between the events of the first and second film. Like seeing like Jonathan Breck obviously as the Creeper has that beer belly and he's wearing this dreadful red shirt throughout the film. Like the physique obviously it's not there anymore. It's obvious. And that's something that, you know, is pretty much just sad that, you know, they can't really put in more effort than that to make it look more convincing. So the Creepers look was always a bit infuriating, as well as obviously the cast themselves and obviously the execution of certain scenes that we got here and there. So overall, that's pretty much all to cover for the negatives. And so all I can say about this bullshit movie is that you do not waste your time with this. My recommendation is definitely just stick with the first two films, especially the original, because that is definitely a genuinely good classic. So, yeah, Jeepers Creepers 3, you know, it was a very problematic film. We waited 14 years to be disappointed by, but while I can respect the ideas, don't waste your time with this, people. And yeah, just this movie can simply fuck off and rot from where it came from. And so, going from there, feel free to, as always, like, comment and subscribe. And cheers for watching.